Original. You can't keep doing this to yourself, Melissa. When was the last time you actually went home before midnight? Dr. Patricia Wells asked me as I finally stripped off my scrubs after another grueling shift at Nashville General Hospital. Paraphrased. Melissa, you need to stop overworking yourself. Dr. Patricia Wells questioned me about my late nights, asking when I'd last left before 12 as I took off my uniform following a particularly demanding shift at Nashville General Hospital. Original. My name is Melissa Howard, and at 41 years old, I've been a trauma nurse for nearly 2 decades. Paraphrased. I'm Melissa Howard, a 41-year-old who has worked as a trauma nurse for almost 20 years. Original. The exhaustion in my bones felt heavier than usual that Thursday evening, but I forced a smile. Paraphrased. That Thursday evening, a deeper weariness than usual weighed on me, yet I managed to put on a smile. Original. Someone has to cover the extra shifts. We're understaffed, and these patients need us. Paraphrased. With our team being short-staffed, someone has to take on the extra hours, and our patients depend on us. Original. Patricia shook her head with concern. Paraphrased. Patricia worriedly shook her head. Original. Your dedication is admirable, but you're burning yourself out. Paraphrased. While your commitment is commendable, you're on the path to burnout. Original. Even superheroes need rest. Paraphrased. Even heroes require time to recover. Original. I glanced at my watch. It was already past 11 p.m., marking the end of a 16-hour shift that had started before dawn. Paraphrased. I looked at my watch to see it was after 11 p.m., bringing an end to the 16-hour workday that had begun before sunrise. Original. My feet ached. Paraphrased. My feet were throbbing. Original. My back screamed for relief. Paraphrased. My back was crying out for a break. Original. And all I wanted was to collapse into my husband's arms. Paraphrased. My only desire was to fall into my husband's embrace. Original. Tyler understands. Paraphrased. Tyler gets it. Original. He knows this job comes with sacrifices. Paraphrased. He is aware that this career demands personal sacrifices. Original. What I didn't tell Patricia was that lately Tyler had been distant, cold, even. Paraphrased. I didn't mention to Patricia that Tyler had recently become emotionally distant, almost uncaring. Original. When I'd try to share stories about particularly challenging cases, he'd barely look up from his phone. Paraphrased. He would hardly ever look up from his phone when I attempted to tell him about especially difficult cases. Original. When I'd suggest date nights to reconnect. Paraphrased. He would claim he was too tired from his work at Northrise Apparel, the clothing company where he managed their logistics department. Original. He'd claim he was too tired from his work at Northrise Apparel, the clothing company where he managed their logistics department. Paraphrased. He would turn down my ideas for date nights to reconnect, saying he was too exhausted from his job managing the logistics department at Northrise Apparel, a clothing company. Original. But I attributed it to stress. Paraphrased. However, I believed it was simply due to stress. Original. After 12 years of marriage, we'd weathered difficult periods before. Paraphrased. Having been married for 12 years, we had faced and overcome tough times in the past. Original. Just promise me you'll take some time off soon, Patricia said, gathering her things. Paraphrased. Just assure me you'll take a break soon, Patricia told me as she collected her belongings. Original. You're one of our best nurses, but you're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Paraphrased. You're a valuable member of our nursing staff, but you won't be able to help anyone if you're too worn out to work. Original. I nodded. Paraphrased. I gave a nod. Original. Though deep down I knew I wouldn't slow down. Paraphrased. Even so, I knew inside that I wasn't going to reduce my work hours. Original. This hospital, these patients, this work. Paraphrased. This hospital, these patients, and this career. Original. It was my calling. Paraphrased. This was my true purpose. Original. I'd built my reputation on being the nurse who never said no, who stayed late when others went home, who took on the most challenging cases without complaint. Paraphrased. My reputation was built on always being the nurse who said yes, who remained after others left, and who handled the toughest cases without any protest. Original. My colleagues respected me. Paraphrased. My coworkers held me in high regard. Original. My supervisors trusted me. Paraphrased. The people I reported to had faith in me. Original. And the patients' families knew they could count on me during their darkest hours. Paraphrased. And the families of patients knew they could rely on me during their most difficult moments. Original. As I walked through the parking garage toward my car, something felt off. Paraphrased. Walking through the parking garage to my car, I had a strange feeling. Original. Maybe it was intuition. Paraphrased. It could have been a gut feeling. Original. Or maybe it was just the weight of exhaustion making everything seem more ominous than usual. Paraphrased. Or perhaps my overwhelming fatigue was making everything appear more threatening than it really was. Original. The fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows between the concrete pillars, and my footsteps echoed louder than normal. Paraphrased. The fluorescent lights created unsettling shadows among the concrete pillars, and the sound of my steps seemed to echo more loudly than usual. Original. I shook off the feeling and focused on getting home. Paraphrased. I dismissed the feeling and concentrated on driving home. Original. The drive through Nashville's quiet streets should have been peaceful, but anxiety nodded at me. Paraphrased. Although the drive through the calm streets of Nashville should have been relaxing, I felt a familiar sense of anxiety. Original. Tyler hadn't returned my text from earlier in the day, which wasn't entirely unusual given how busy we both were. Paraphrased. Tyler hadn't replied to my text from earlier, which wasn't completely surprising since we were both so busy. Original. But something about his recent behavior worried me. Paraphrased. Yet, something about his recent actions was unsettling. Original. We used to be partners in everything, sharing our daily struggles and victories. Paraphrased. We used to be a team, sharing our daily challenges and triumphs. Original. Now, conversations felt forced, and the comfortable silences had become uncomfortable distances. Paraphrased. Now our talks seemed strained, and the comfortable quiet between us had turned into an awkward silence. Original. I pulled into our driveway and sat in the car for a moment, steeling myself for another evening of polite but hollow interactions. Paraphrased. I parked in the driveway and took a moment in the car to prepare myself for another night of polite, empty conversations. Original. The house was dark except for a single light upstairs in our bedroom. Paraphrased. The house was completely dark except for one light shining from our bedroom upstairs. Original. At least Tyler had waited up for me. Paraphrased. At least Tyler was still awake, waiting for me. Original. Growing up as the daughter of 2 factory workers in a small Tennessee town, I'd learned early that hard work and dedication were the keys to building a better life. Paraphrased. As a child of 2 factory workers in a small Tennessee town, I learned from an early age that a better life depended on hard work and commitment. Original. My parents, Robert and Martha Howard, had sacrificed everything to send me to nursing school. Paraphrased. My parents, Robert and Martha Howard, had given up everything to put me through nursing school. Original. They'd worked double shifts and gone without luxuries so I could pursue my dream of helping people in their most vulnerable moments. Paraphrased. They worked extra shifts and did without luxuries so I could follow my dream of helping others when they were at their most fragile. Original. I met Tyler 13 years ago at a community fundraiser for the local children's hospital. Paraphrased. I first met Tyler 13 years ago at a fundraiser for the local children's hospital. Original. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to understand my passion for nursing. Paraphrased. He was charismatic, driven, and appeared to appreciate my love for nursing. Original. He'd grown up in a middle-class family where his father owned a small construction business, and his mother taught elementary school. Paraphrased. He had a middle-class upbringing, with his father owning a small construction company and his mother working as an elementary school teacher. Original. We bonded over our shared values of hard work and family, and he seemed genuinely proud of my career achievements. Paraphrased. We connected over our mutual belief in the importance of hard work and family, and he seemed truly proud of my professional accomplishments. Original. During our courtship and early marriage, Tyler had been my biggest supporter. Paraphrased. In the early days of our relationship and marriage, Tyler was my greatest advocate. Original. He'd bring me coffee during my night shifts, listen patiently to my work stories, and encourage me when I decided to pursue additional certifications in trauma care. Paraphrased. He would bring me coffee on my overnight shifts, patiently listen to me talk about my job, and motivate me to get further certifications in trauma care. Original. He celebrated my promotions and never complained about the long hours or the emotional toll my job sometimes took. Paraphrased. He celebrated my professional advancements and never once complained about my long workdays or the emotional strain my job occasionally caused. Original. But somewhere in the past year things had shifted. Paraphrased. Yet over the last year our dynamic had changed. Original. Tyler became critical of my schedule, suggesting I was married to the hospital more than to him. Paraphrased. Tyler started to criticize my schedule, implying that my commitment to the hospital was greater than my commitment to him. Original. He'd make passive-aggressive comments about other wives who were more available to their husbands. Paraphrased. He would make subtle, indirect comments about other wives who were more present for their husbands. Original. When I'd try to discuss it, he'd brush off my concerns or change the subject entirely. Paraphrased. He would either dismiss my worries or completely switch the topic whenever I attempted to talk about it. Original. I'd started to notice other changes too. Paraphrased. I also began to observe other differences. Original. Tyler had become more secretive about his phone, taking calls in other rooms, and keeping his screen turned away when texting. Paraphrased. Tyler was being more secretive with his phone, answering calls in separate rooms, and keeping the screen hidden while he texted. Original. He'd started working late more frequently, claiming his supervisor at Northrise Apparel was demanding longer hours from the entire logistics team. Paraphrased. He was staying late at work more often, saying his boss at Northrise Apparel required the whole logistics team to work extra hours. Original. New clothes appeared in his wardrobe, expensive shirts and cologne that seemed beyond what his salary should afford. Paraphrased. I noticed new, expensive shirts and cologne in his closet that his salary didn't seem to justify. Original. My best friend since nursing school, Janet Morrison, had tried to reassure me during our occasional coffee dates. Paraphrased. My best friend from nursing school, Janet Morrison, would try to comfort me during the times we'd meet for coffee. Original. Marriage has its seasons, she'd say with her usual gentle wisdom. Paraphrased. She would often tell me with her customary quiet wisdom that marriages go through different phases. Original. You two have been through harder times and come out stronger. Paraphrased. You both have already overcome more difficult challenges and are stronger for it. Original. Janet worked as a nurse practitioner at a private clinic downtown, and she'd often joke that she lived vicariously through my exciting emergency room stories while she dealt with routine checkups and minor ailments. Paraphrased. Janet, who was a nurse practitioner at a private downtown clinic, would often joke that she got to experience the thrill of my emergency room stories since her job involved only routine checkups and small illnesses. Original. Janet had been my maid of honor at our wedding, and she'd become like a sister to me over the years. Paraphrased. Janet served as my maid of honor and, over time, had become like a sister to me. Original. She was single, having never found the right person to settle down with, but she always said she was happy focusing on her career and her close friendships. Paraphrased. She was not married, having never met the right partner, but she always claimed to be content with her focus on her job and friendships. Original. Tyler had always gotten along well with Janet, often joking that he was lucky to have married someone with such a sane and sensible best friend. Paraphrased. Tyler had always had a good relationship with Janet, often teasing that he was fortunate to have married a woman whose best friend was so rational and level-headed. Original. Recently though, I'd noticed that Janet seemed different when Tyler was around. Paraphrased. However, I had recently observed that Janet acted differently when Tyler was present. Original. She'd become quieter, more reserved, and she'd started declining dinner invitations when I mentioned Tyler would be joining us. Paraphrased. She grew more quiet and withdrawn, and she began turning down dinner invitations when I said Tyler would be there. Original. When I asked her about it, she'd claimed she was just busy with work and didn't want to impose on our couple time. Paraphrased. When I questioned her about it, she insisted she was simply too busy with work and didn't want to interrupt our time as a couple. Original. Looking back now, there were so many signs I'd chosen to ignore. So many red flags I'd explained away because I trusted the people I loved most. Paraphrased. In hindsight, I see now that I had ignored countless warning signs and justified many red flags because I had faith in the people I cared about most. Original. The breaking point came 3 weeks before that fateful Thursday night. Paraphrased. The breaking point occurred 3 weeks before that memorable Thursday evening. Original. I'd been working a particularly challenging shift when we received a teenage car accident victim. Paraphrased. We had just received a teenager who had been in a car accident while I was on a particularly difficult shift. Original. The girl, barely 17, had suffered massive internal bleeding, and despite our best efforts, we couldn't save her. Paraphrased. The girl, who was just 17, had severe internal bleeding, and we were unable to save her despite all of our efforts. Original. Her parents' grief was devastating to witness, and I'd stayed late to comfort them and help with arrangements. Paraphrased. Witnessing her parents' sorrow was heartbreaking, and I remained late to console them and assist with the necessary arrangements. Original. When I finally got home around midnight, I found Tyler in the living room with his laptop closed beside him and a guilty expression on his face. Paraphrased. When I finally arrived home around midnight, I discovered Tyler in the living room. His laptop was closed next to him, and he looked guilty. Original. You're late again, he said, not bothering to ask about my day or acknowledge the emotional weight I was carrying. Paraphrased. You're late again, he stated, without asking about my day or recognizing the emotional burden I was carrying. Original. We lost a patient, I said quietly, hoping for some understanding, some comfort from the man who was supposed to be my partner in life. Paraphrased. We couldn't save a patient, I said softly, hoping for some empathy, some solace from the person who was meant to be my life partner. Original. Tyler barely looked up from his phone. Paraphrased. Tyler hardly glanced away from his phone. Original. You can't save everyone, Melissa. Paraphrased. Melissa, it's impossible to save every person. Original. Maybe if you didn't get so emotionally involved, these things wouldn't affect you so much. Paraphrased. Perhaps if you weren't so emotionally invested, these events wouldn't impact you as deeply. Original. His callousness hit me like a physical blow. Paraphrased. His insensitivity felt like a physical strike. Original. This is my job, Tyler. Paraphrased. Tyler, this is what I do for a living. Original. This is who I am. Paraphrased. This is a part of my identity. Original. I thought you understood that. Paraphrased. I believed you comprehended this. Original. What I understand is that you care more about strangers than your own husband. Paraphrased. What I do understand is that you prioritize people you don't know over your own husband. Original. He snapped back. Paraphrased. He retorted sharply. Original. When's the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about your work? Paraphrased. When did we last have a genuine conversation that wasn't centered on your job? Original. When's the last time you made time for us? Paraphrased. When did you last set aside time for us as a couple? Original. The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth in it, but his timing was cruel. Paraphrased. The accusation was painful because it was partly true, but the way he said it was heartless. Original. I'm doing my best to balance everything, I said, fighting back tears. Paraphrased. I'm doing everything I can to manage it all, I said, trying to hold back my tears. Original. I thought we were a team. Paraphrased. I believed we were partners in this. Original. Teams require both players to show up, Tyler said coldly before walking upstairs, leaving me alone with my grief and confusion. Paraphrased. Teams need both people to be present, Tyler said unemotionally before heading upstairs, abandoning me to my sadness and bewilderment. Original. That night I'd called Janet, desperate for someone to listen and understand. Paraphrased. I phoned Janet that evening, urgently needing someone to hear me out and understand. Original. She'd been strangely quiet during our conversation, offering minimal comfort and ending the call quickly, claiming she had an early morning. Paraphrased. She was unusually silent during our talk, gave very little reassurance, and ended the call abruptly, saying she had to get up early. Original. It was the first time in our friendship that she hadn't been there when I needed her most. Paraphrased. For the first time ever in our friendship, she wasn't there for me when I needed her the most. Original. In the days that followed, Tyler's behavior became even more erratic. Paraphrased. Tyler's actions became even more unpredictable in the days that followed. Original. He'd disappear for hours without explanation, claiming he was running errands or meeting friends I'd never heard of. Paraphrased. He would vanish for hours without an explanation, claiming he was doing errands or seeing friends I didn't know. Original. When I'd suggest marriage counseling, he dismissed the idea, saying I was overreacting and that our problems would resolve themselves once I learned to prioritize better. Paraphrased. When I brought up the idea of marriage counseling, he rejected it, telling me I was overreacting and that our issues would disappear once I learned to manage my priorities. Original. I threw myself even deeper into work, taking on extra shifts and volunteering for the most challenging cases. Paraphrased. I immersed myself even more in my work, picking up extra shifts and volunteering for the most difficult cases. Original. If Tyler thought I cared too much about my patients, then I'd prove him right. Paraphrased. If Tyler felt I cared too much for my patients, then I would confirm his belief. Original. At least at the hospital, my dedication was appreciated and my efforts made a difference. Paraphrased. At the very least, my hard work was valued at the hospital, and my efforts truly helped people. Original. The patients and their families needed me, even if my husband apparently didn't. Paraphrased. The patients and their loved ones depended on me, even if my husband seemed not to. Original. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days healing others while my own life was quietly falling apart. Paraphrased. I was well aware of the irony that I was spending my time helping others while my own life was silently crumbling. Original. But I was a fighter. Paraphrased. However, I am a resilient person. Original. I'd overcome poverty, put myself through school, and built a respected career in one of the most demanding fields in healthcare. Paraphrased. I had risen from poverty, paid for my own education, and established a well-regarded career in one of the most challenging areas of healthcare. Original. Whatever was happening in my marriage, I would find a way to fix it, just like I fixed everything else. Paraphrased. No matter what was going on in my marriage, I was going to find a solution, just as I always did with everything else. Original. I had no idea that some things once broken could never be repaired. Paraphrased. I didn't realize that some things once shattered can't ever be fixed. Original. That Thursday shift had been particularly brutal. Paraphrased. My shift that Thursday was especially tough. Original. We'd received multiple trauma cases from a multi-car accident on Interstate 40, and I'd spent hours in surgery assisting Dr. Wells with the most critical patients. Paraphrased. We had multiple trauma victims from a major car crash on Interstate 40, and I spent several hours in the operating room helping Dr. Wells with the patients in the worst condition. Original. By the time my shift officially ended at 7 p.m., I was physically and emotionally drained, but I stayed another 4 hours to ensure all our patients were stable and comfortable. Paraphrased. By the time my workday was officially over at 7 p.m., I was completely exhausted, but I remained for an additional 4 hours to make sure every patient was in a stable and comfortable state. Original. The drive home felt longer than usual. Paraphrased. The journey back home seemed to take more time than normal. Original. My hands ached from the constant pressure of compressions and sutures, and my feet throbbed in my worn nursing shoes. Paraphrased. The constant pressing from compressions and sutures had made my hands sore, and my feet were pounding inside my old nursing shoes. Original. All I wanted was to sink into a hot bath and fall asleep in Tyler's arms, even if our relationship had been strained lately. Paraphrased. All I wished for was to relax in a warm bath and drift off to sleep in Tyler's embrace, despite the recent tension between us. Original. Maybe tonight would be different. Paraphrased. Perhaps things would be different tonight. Original. Maybe we could finally talk through our problems and find our way back to each other. Paraphrased. Maybe we would finally be able to talk about our issues and reconnect. Original. As I turned onto our street, I noticed Janet's distinctive red Honda Accord parked 2 blocks away from our house. Paraphrased. As I drove onto our street, I saw Janet's familiar red Honda Accord parked a couple of blocks from our home. Original. It struck me as odd. Paraphrased. This seemed strange to me. Original. If she was visiting, why hadn't she parked in our driveway as usual? Paraphrased. If she were here to see us, why didn't she park in our driveway like she always did? Original. I shook off the thought, attributing it to my exhaustion playing tricks on me. Paraphrased. I dismissed the idea, assuming my fatigue was making me imagine things. Original. Janet often worked late at the clinic, so maybe she was just visiting another friend in the neighborhood. Paraphrased. Janet frequently worked late at the clinic, so it was possible she was just visiting another friend who lived nearby. Original. I pulled into our driveway and sat in my car for a moment, gathering the energy to face whatever mood Tyler might be in. Paraphrased. I drove into our driveway and remained in my car for a moment, trying to muster the strength to deal with whatever mood Tyler was in. Original. The house was mostly dark, except for the soft glow coming from our bedroom window upstairs. Paraphrased. The house was largely dark, with the exception of a gentle light shining from our upstairs bedroom window. Original. A small part of me hoped he'd waited up for me, maybe even prepared something special to help mend the growing rift between us. Paraphrased. Part of me hoped he was still awake for me, maybe even having planned something nice to help heal the growing distance between us. Original. My key turned silently in the lock, and I stepped into the foyer, setting my purse and keys on the small table by the door. Paraphrased. My key turned in the lock without a sound, and I entered the foyer, placing my purse and keys on the small table near the door. Original. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of voices coming from upstairs. Paraphrased. The house was silent except for the faint sound of people talking upstairs. Original. My heart lifted slightly. Paraphrased. My spirits rose a little. Original. Maybe Tyler was on a work call and would be free to talk once he finished. Paraphrased. Perhaps Tyler was on a business call and would be available to speak when it was over. Original. I climbed the stairs slowly, my feet heavy with exhaustion. Paraphrased. My feet felt heavy from fatigue as I slowly went up the stairs. Original. The voices became clearer as I approached our bedroom, and I realized there were 2 distinct tones. Paraphrased. The voices grew more distinct as I neared our bedroom, and I could tell there were 2 different people speaking. Original. Tyler was talking to someone, but the conversation sounded intimate rather than professional. Paraphrased. Tyler was speaking to someone, but the tone of the conversation seemed personal, not work-related. Original. The second voice was softer, distinctly feminine, and hauntingly familiar. Paraphrased. The other voice was softer, clearly a woman's, and disturbingly familiar. Original. I paused outside our bedroom door, my hand frozen on the door knob. Paraphrased. I stopped outside the door to our bedroom, my hand still on the doorknob. Original. Part of me wanted to burst in immediately, but something held me back. Paraphrased. One part of me wanted to rush in right away, but something prevented me from doing so. Original. Maybe it was denial, or maybe it was the last vestige of trust one still held for the 2 people I loved most in the world. Paraphrased. It could have been disbelief, Or perhaps it was the last bit of faith I had in the two people I cared about the most. Original. I pressed my ear to the door, hoping to hear something that would explain away my growing suspicions. Paraphrased. I put my ear against the door, hoping to hear something that would make my rising suspicions disappear. Original. She'll be working late again, I heard Tyler say. Paraphrased. I heard Tyler say. She's going to be working late again. Original. She always does on Thursdays. Paraphrased. She always stays late on Thursdays. Original. We have at least 3 more hours. Paraphrased. We have at least 3 hours to ourselves. Original. I feel terrible about this, came the reply, and my blood turned to ice as I recognized Janet's voice. Paraphrased. The reply, I feel awful about this, made my blood run cold as I realized it was Janet's voice. Original. She's my best friend, Tyler. Paraphrased. Tyler, she's my closest friend. Original. She doesn't deserve this. Paraphrased. She doesn't deserve to be treated this way. Original. You said yourself that she's never home anymore. Paraphrased. You said it yourself, she's never at home anymore. Original. Tyler responded. Paraphrased. Tyler replied. Original. When's the last time she really paid attention to either of us? Paraphrased. When was the last time she truly paid attention to you or me? Original. You've been there for me more in the past 6 months than she has in the past 2 years. Paraphrased. You've been more supportive of me in the last 6 months than she has in the last 2 years. Original. My legs began to shake as the reality of what I was hearing sank in. Paraphrased. The truth of what I was hearing set in, and my legs started to tremble. Original. The two people I trusted most in the world were betraying me in the most intimate way possible. Paraphrased. The two people I had the most faith in were cheating on me in the most personal way. Original. My mind raced through all the signs I'd missed. Paraphrased. I started to think of all the clues I had overlooked. Original. All the times Janet had been unavailable when I needed her. Paraphrased. All the occasions when Janet wasn't there for me. Original. All the excuses Tyler had made for his strange behavior. Paraphrased. All of the reasons Tyler had given for his odd actions. Original. I know, but still. Janet's voice was cut off by what sounded like movement on the bed. Paraphrased. I know, but. Janet's voice was interrupted by what sounded like rustling from the bed. Original. Don't think about her right now, Tyler said, his voice taking on a tone I'd once thought was reserved only for me. Paraphrased. Don't worry about her right now, Tyler said in a voice I used to believe was meant for me alone. Original. Think about us. Paraphrased. Focus on us. Original. Think about how good this feels. Paraphrased. Think about how great this is. Original. I couldn't listen anymore. Paraphrased. I couldn't stand to hear any more. Original. My hand trembled as I slowly turned the door knob, preparing myself for a sight that would forever change everything I thought I knew about my life. Paraphrased. My hand was shaking as I slowly twisted the doorknob, getting ready for a scene that would permanently alter everything I thought was true about my life. Original. The door opened silently, and the scene before me was worse than anything my imagination could have conjured. Paraphrased. The door opened quietly, revealing a sight that was far more terrible than anything I could have ever imagined. Original. There, in the bed Tyler and I had shared for 12 years, were the two people I'd trusted most in the world. Paraphrased. In the bed that Tyler and I had slept in for 12 years, I saw the two people I had the most faith in. Original. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't notice me standing in the doorway, my mouth open in silent shock. Paraphrased. They were so preoccupied with each other that they didn't see me standing in the doorway, my mouth agape in quiet disbelief. Original. My knees buckled and I had to grab the doorframe to keep from collapsing completely. Paraphrased. My knees gave out, and I had to hold on to the doorframe to prevent myself from falling down entirely. Original. The room spun around me as 12 years of marriage and 20 years of friendship crumbled in an instant. Paraphrased. The room began to spin as 12 years of marriage and 20 years of friendship were destroyed in a single moment. Original. Everything made sense now. Paraphrased. Everything became clear at that moment. Original. Tyler's distant behavior, Janet's awkwardness around me, the unexplained absences, the secret of phone calls. Paraphrased. Tyler's coldness, Janet's uncomfortable demeanor around me, the unexplained disappearances, the secret phone calls. It all made sense. Original. But instead of screaming or confronting them immediately, something cold and calculating took over. Paraphrased. However, instead of yelling or confronting them right away, a cold, calculating feeling came over me. Original. Maybe it was the years of training to remain calm under pressure. Paraphrased. Perhaps it was due to my years of training to stay composed in high-stress situations. Original. Or maybe it was pure survival instinct. Paraphrased. Or maybe it was simply a natural instinct to survive. Original. But I found myself reaching for my phone instead of my voice. Paraphrased. Yet I reached for my phone instead of speaking. Original. I raised the camera and began recording, capturing several minutes of their betrayal in crystal clear detail. Paraphrased. I held up the camera and started to record, capturing their infidelity in perfect clarity for several minutes. Original. Tyler's face was clearly visible, as was Janet's distinctive butterfly tattoo on her shoulder blade. Paraphrased. Tyler's face was easily identifiable, as was the unique butterfly tattoo on Janet's shoulder blade. Original. There could be no denying what was happening, no explaining it away as a misunderstanding. Paraphrased. There was no way to deny what was happening or to dismiss it as a simple misunderstanding. Original. As I recorded, my mind began working with surgical precision. Paraphrased. While I was recording, my thoughts began to work with a clinical precision. Original. I thought about our joint bank accounts, our shared assets, the house that was in both our names, but that I'd paid most of the mortgage on with my higher salary. Paraphrased. I started to think about our shared bank accounts, our communal assets, and the house that was in both of our names but that I had mostly paid for with my larger income. Original. I thought about the expensive gifts Tyler had been buying lately and realized he'd probably been using our money to woo my best friend. Paraphrased. I considered the expensive presents Tyler had been getting recently, and understood that he was likely using our money to impress my best friend. Original. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, I quietly backed away from the door and retreated downstairs. Paraphrased. After what seemed like a very long time, but was likely only 5 minutes, I silently moved away from the door and went back downstairs. Original. My hands were surprisingly steady as I forwarded the video to my personal email account and then deleted it from my phone. Paraphrased. My hands were surprisingly stable as I sent the video to my personal email and then erased it from my phone. Original. I wanted to ensure I had evidence, but I also wanted to be smart about how I used it. Paraphrased. I wanted to make sure I had proof, but I also wanted to be strategic about how I used it. Original. I sat in my car in the driveway and called my sister Rebecca, who lived in Memphis and worked as a family law attorney. Paraphrased. I remained in my car in the driveway and called my sister Rebecca, who was a family law attorney living in Memphis. Original. It was nearly midnight, but I knew she'd answer if I called twice in a row, our family emergency signal. Paraphrased. It was close to midnight, but I knew she would answer if I called 2 times in a row, which was our family's signal for an emergency. Original. Melissa, what's wrong? Rebecca's voice was immediately alert despite the late hour. Paraphrased. Melissa, what's wrong? Rebecca's voice instantly became alert, even though it was so late. Original. I need a divorce lawyer, I said quietly, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Paraphrased. I need a divorce attorney, I said softly, amazed by how calm I sounded. Original. The best one, you know. Paraphrased. The most skilled one you can think of. Original. Oh honey, what happened? Rebecca's voice was filled with concern and anger. Paraphrased. Oh dear, what happened? Rebecca's voice was full of both worry and anger. Original. I'll explain everything later. Paraphrased. I'll tell you everything later. Original. Right now I need to know if I have video evidence of adultery. And if most of our assets are in my name or paid for with my income, what are my options? Paraphrased. For now, I need to know what my options are if I have video proof of infidelity and if most of our assets are in my name or I paid for them with my earnings. Original. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, processing what I was telling her. Paraphrased. Rebecca was silent for a moment, taking in what I had said. Original. With solid evidence of infidelity. Paraphrased. With concrete proof of cheating. Original. And if you can prove primary ownership of assets, you could potentially keep most of everything in the divorce. Paraphrased. And if you can show that you are the primary owner of the assets, you could possibly retain the majority of everything in the divorce. Original. But Melissa, are you sure about this? Paraphrased. But Melissa, are you certain about this? Original. Is there any chance? Paraphrased. Is there any possibility? Original. There's no chance, I interrupted. Paraphrased. There is no possibility, I cut in. Original. It's over. Paraphrased. It's finished. Original. I just need to be smart about how I handle it. Paraphrased. I just need to be strategic in how I proceed. Original. Okay. I'm going to give you the name of the best divorce attorney in Nashville. Paraphrased. Okay. I'm going to give you the name of Nashville's top divorce lawyer. Original. Her name is Victoria Sterling and she specializes in high-asset divorces. Paraphrased. Her name is Victoria Sterling and she focuses on divorces with a lot of assets. Original. Don't do anything else tonight except document everything you can think of. Paraphrased. Don't do anything else tonight other than write down everything you can remember. Original. Don't confront them. Paraphrased. Don't face them. Original. Don't move any money. Paraphrased. Don't transfer any funds. Original. Just gather information. Paraphrased. Just collect all the information you can. Original. What about work? Paraphrased. What should I do about my job? Original. Should I tell anyone? Paraphrased. Should I inform anyone? Original. Not yet. Paraphrased. Not at this time. Original. Act normal until we have a strategy. Paraphrased. Pretend everything is fine until we have a plan. Original. How vindictive do you want to be? Paraphrased. How much revenge do you want to get? Original. I thought about the years of sacrifice, the trust I'd given so freely, the way they'd made me feel like I was the problem in my marriage. Paraphrased. I considered all the years of self-sacrifice, the trust one had given so willingly, and the way they had made me believe I was the one causing issues in our marriage. Original. As vindictive as legally possible. Paraphrased. I want to get as much revenge as the law allows. Original. Good. Paraphrased. That's good. Original. Victoria will help you with that. Paraphrased. Victoria can assist you with that. Original. Call her first thing in the morning. Paraphrased. Phone her as soon as you wake up. Original. I ended the call and sat in the darkness, planning my next moves with the same methodical approach I used in medical emergencies. Paraphrased. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark, meticulously planning my next steps with the same systematic process I used during medical emergencies. Original. I spent the rest of that night in a hotel room, using the time to meticulously document everything I could remember about our finances, assets, and the timeline of Tyler's suspicious behavior. Paraphrased. I stayed in a hotel room for the rest of the night, using the time to carefully record everything I could recall about our money, possessions, and the sequence of Tyler's suspicious actions. Original. I accessed our online banking from my laptop and screenshotted months of transactions, noting the expensive dinners, hotel charges, and purchases that I now realized had been funding his affair. Paraphrased. I logged into our online bank account on my laptop and took screenshots of months of transactions, making note of the costly dinners, hotel fees, and purchases that I now knew had been paying for his affair. Original. The next morning I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, claiming food poisoning. Paraphrased. The following morning I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, saying I had food poisoning. Original. Patricia was immediately concerned, knowing how rarely I missed shifts, but I assured her I'd be back by Monday. Paraphrased. Patricia was instantly worried, knowing how infrequently I missed work, but I told her I would be back on Monday. Original. I needed the day to meet with Victoria Sterling and begin the process of dismantling my marriage with surgical precision. Paraphrased. I needed the day to have a meeting with Victoria Sterling and start the process of ending my marriage with careful and deliberate accuracy. Original. Victoria's office was in a sleek downtown building, and she herself was exactly what I'd expected: sharp, professional, and utterly ruthless when it came to protecting her clients' interests. Paraphrased. Victoria's office was located in a stylish downtown building, and she was precisely as I had imagined: intelligent, professional, and completely merciless when defending her clients' needs. Original. She watched the video I'd recorded with no visible emotion, taking notes as she observed the evidence. Paraphrased. She watched the video I had recorded without showing any emotion, writing notes as she looked at the proof. Original. This is excellent documentation, she said when it finished. Paraphrased. This is excellent evidence, she said after the video ended. Original. With evidence this clear, we can pursue a fault-based divorce, which puts us in a very strong position. Paraphrased. With such clear evidence, we can seek a divorce based on fault, which puts us in a very good position. Original. Tell me about your assets. Paraphrased. Tell me about your possessions. Original. I laid out everything. Paraphrased. I explained everything in detail. Original. The house we'd bought 8 years ago, mostly with my down payment and consistently higher mortgage contributions, our joint savings accounts, which were primarily funded by my salary, his car, which I'd co-signed for, and my retirement accounts, which Tennessee law would normally consider marital property. Paraphrased. I described everything. The house we had bought 8 years ago, which was mostly paid for with my down payment and larger mortgage payments, our shared savings accounts, which were mainly funded by my earnings, his car, for which I had co-signed the loan, and my retirement accounts, which Tennessee law would usually view as shared assets. Original. The fact that you've been the primary breadwinner and have documentation of that will work in our favor, Victoria explained. Paraphrased. Victoria explained. The fact that you have been the main financial provider and have proof of that will benefit us. Original. Combined with the adultery evidence, we can argue for you to retain the majority of marital assets, but I want to be strategic about this. Paraphrased. Along with the proof of infidelity, we can make the case for you to keep most of the marital assets, but we need to approach this strategically. Original. Don't tip your hand until we're ready to file. Paraphrased. Don't let them know what's coming until we are prepared to file the paperwork. Original. What do you mean? Paraphrased. What are you suggesting? Original. Continue acting normal. Paraphrased. Keep behaving as you normally would. Original. Go home tonight. Paraphrased. Return home this evening. Original. Have dinner with your husband. Paraphrased. Eat dinner with your husband. Original. Pretend everything is fine. Paraphrased. Act as if nothing is wrong. Original. Meanwhile, I'll prepare the paperwork and we'll coordinate with a forensic accountant to fully document the financial situation. Paraphrased. In the meantime, I will get the paperwork ready, and we will work with a forensic accountant to completely document the financial situation. Original. When we move fast and completely. Paraphrased. When we make our move, we will do it quickly and without leaving any room for error. Original. The thought of going home and pretending nothing had happened made my stomach turn, but I understood the strategy. Paraphrased. The idea of returning home and acting as if nothing was wrong made me feel sick, but I grasped the plan. Original. How long will this take? Paraphrased. How much time will this require? Original. If we do it right, we can have papers served within a week and temporary orders in place shortly after. Paraphrased. If we handle this correctly, We can have the legal documents delivered within a week and have temporary orders established soon after. Original. The key is to maintain the element of surprise while we get everything in order. Paraphrased. The most important thing is to keep it a surprise while we get everything prepared. Original. I spent the weekend playing the role of the devoted wife while secretly preparing for war. Paraphrased. I spent the weekend pretending to be a loving wife while secretly getting ready for a fight. Original. Tyler seemed more relaxed than he'd been in months. Paraphrased. Tyler appeared more at ease than he had been in a long time. Original. Probably because he thought he was successfully deceiving me. Paraphrased. This was likely because he believed he was getting away with his deception. Original. He was even affectionate, suggesting we have dinner out and holding my hand across the table as he spun lies about his day. Paraphrased. He was even loving, suggesting we eat out and holding my hand over the table as he fabricated stories about his day. Original. Janet called Saturday afternoon to check in. Paraphrased. Janet phoned me on Saturday afternoon to see how I was doing. Original. Her voice saccharine with false concern. Paraphrased. She spoke in a voice that was falsely sweet with feigned concern. Original. You sounded tired when we talked earlier this week. Paraphrased. You sounded exhausted when we spoke earlier this week. Original. Everything okay? Paraphrased. Is everything all right? Original. Just work stress, I replied, marveling at how easily I could match her deceptive tone. Paraphrased. It's just stress from work, I answered, surprised at how easily I could mimic her deceitful tone. Original. Tyler and I are actually doing really well lately. Paraphrased. Actually, Tyler and I have been doing great recently. Original. He's been so attentive and sweet. Paraphrased. He's been so caring and kind. Original. I could practically hear her discomfort through the phone. Paraphrased. I could almost sense her unease over the phone. Original. That's wonderful. Paraphrased. That's fantastic. Original. I'm so happy for you both. Paraphrased. I'm so glad for the two of you. Original. We should all get together soon, I added, twisting the knife a little deeper. Paraphrased. We should all hang out sometime soon, I added, putting a bit more pressure on her. Original. Maybe next weekend you could come over for dinner. Paraphrased. Perhaps you could come over for dinner next weekend. Original. I might be busy next weekend. Paraphrased. I may have plans for next weekend. Original. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. Paraphrased. Let me see what my schedule looks like and I'll let you know. Original. By Monday morning, Victoria had everything ready. Paraphrased. By Monday morning, Victoria had finished all the preparations. Original. The forensic accountant had confirmed what I already knew. Paraphrased. The forensic accountant had verified what I already knew to be true. Original. I had contributed approximately 70% of our combined assets over the course of our marriage. Paraphrased. I had paid for about 70% of our shared assets during our marriage. Original. The adultery evidence was irrefutable, and thanks to Tennessee's fault-based divorce laws, Tyler's infidelity would cost him dearly. Paraphrased. The proof of adultery was undeniable, and because of Tennessee's divorce laws that are based on fault, Tyler's cheating would have severe financial consequences for him. Original. Are you ready for this? Victoria asked as we reviewed the papers one final time. Paraphrased. Are you prepared for this? Victoria asked while we reviewed the documents for the last time. Original. I thought about that 17-year-old girl I'd lost 3 weeks ago, about how fragile life could be. Paraphrased. I thought about the 17-year-old girl we lost 3 weeks ago, and how vulnerable life can be. Original. About how quickly everything could change. Paraphrased. About how fast things can change. Original. I've been ready since Thursday night. Paraphrased. I've been prepared since that Thursday night. Original. Tuesday morning arrived with deceptive normally. Paraphrased. Tuesday morning started with a misleading sense of normalcy. Original. Tyler kissed me goodbye before leaving for work. Paraphrased. Tyler gave me a kiss goodbye before he left for work. Original. The same pre-functor peck on the cheek he'd been giving me for months. Paraphrased. It was the same emotionless kiss on the cheek he had been giving me for months. Original. Have a good day at work, honey, he said, completely unaware that his comfortable life was about to implode. Paraphrased. Have a great day at work, honey, he said, completely oblivious to the fact that his comfortable life was about to fall apart. Original. You too, I replied sweetly, watching from the window as he drove away in the car I'd helped him finance. Paraphrased. You too, I answered sweetly, watching him from the window as he drove off in the car I had helped him buy. Original. At exactly 10 a.m., Victoria's process server arrived at Tyler's office at Northrise Apparel. Paraphrased. At precisely 10 in the morning, Victoria's legal representative arrived at Tyler's office at Northrise Apparel. Original. She'd specifically chosen a time when he'd be in his weekly team meeting, ensuring maximum visibility for his humiliation. Paraphrased. She had intentionally picked a time when he would be in his weekly team meeting to guarantee the greatest public embarrassment for him. Original. I wasn't there to witness it, but Victoria called me afterward with the details. Paraphrased. I wasn't there to see it, but Victoria called me later to tell me what had happened. Original. He tried to hide the papers in his folder, but his supervisor asked what was wrong when he went pale. Paraphrased. He attempted to conceal the documents in his folder, but his boss asked him what was wrong when he turned pale. Original. She reported with professional satisfaction. Paraphrased. She told me this with professional contentment. Original. Apparently, the entire logistics team now knows he's being served with divorce papers citing adultery. Paraphrased. Apparently, the whole logistics team now knows that he has been served with divorce papers that mention adultery. Original. At 10:30 a.m., a different process server arrived at the private clinic where Janet worked. Paraphrased. At 10:30 in the morning, another legal representative arrived at the private clinic where Janet was employed. Original. I'd specifically requested that Victoria find grounds to name Janet as a co-respondent in the adultery claim, which meant she'd be publicly identified as the other woman in our divorce proceedings. Paraphrased. I had specifically asked Victoria to find a reason to name Janet as a co-respondent in the claim of adultery, which meant she would be publicly identified as the other woman in my divorce case. Original. But that wasn't enough. Paraphrased. But that wasn't sufficient. Original. During my weekend of strategic planning, I'd made some calls to discover something interesting about Janet's employment situation. Paraphrased. Over the weekend of strategic planning, I had made a few phone calls and learned something interesting about Janet's job. Original. The private clinic where she worked was owned by a group of conservative investors who prided themselves on maintaining high moral standards among their staff. Paraphrased. The private clinic she worked at was owned by a group of conservative investors who took pride in upholding strong moral values among their employees. Original. More importantly, Janet had signed a morality clause as part of her employment contract, something that had seemed like an antiquated formality when she'd first mentioned it to me years ago. Paraphrased. What was more important was that Janet had signed a morality clause as part of her job contract, which had seemed like an old-fashioned formality when she first told me about it years ago. Original. At 11 a.m., I made a call to the clinic's administrator, Patricia Hughes, who I'd met at several medical conferences over the years. Paraphrased. At 11 in the morning, I called the clinic's administrator, Patricia Hughes, a woman I had met at various medical conferences throughout the years. Original. Patricia, this is Melissa Howard from Nashville General. Paraphrased. Patricia, it's Melissa Howard from Nashville General. Original. I need to make you aware of a situation involving one of your employees that might affect the clinic's reputation. Paraphrased. I need to bring to your attention a situation concerning one of your employees that could potentially harm the clinic's reputation. Original. I explained the situation professionally, focusing on the documentation I had and the public nature of the divorce proceedings. Paraphrased. I professionally described the situation, highlighting the evidence I possessed and the public aspect of the divorce case. Original. I made it clear that I wasn't asking for any specific action, just ensuring they were aware before it became public knowledge. Paraphrased. I made it clear that I was not asking for a specific action, but simply making sure they knew about it before it became public. Original. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Melissa, Patricia said gravely. Paraphrased. Thank you for informing us about this, Melissa, Patricia said seriously. Original. I'll need to review Janet's employment contract and discuss this with our board of directors. Paraphrased. I will have to look over Janet's employment contract and talk about this with our board of directors. Original. By noon, my phone was buzzing with frantic calls from both Tyler and Janet. Paraphrased. By noon, my phone was vibrating with a series of desperate calls from both Tyler and Janet. Original. I let every single one go to voicemail, following Victoria's advice to maintain silence until our strategy was complete. Paraphrased. I let every single call go to voicemail, as Victoria had advised me to stay quiet until our plan was finalized. Original. The first voicemail from Tyler was angry. Paraphrased. Tyler's first voicemail was full of anger. Original. What the hell is this about, Melissa? Paraphrased. What is the meaning of this, Melissa? Original. You're being ridiculous. Paraphrased. You're acting absurdly. Original. We need to talk. Paraphrased. We have to talk. Original. The second was panicked. Paraphrased. The second one was frantic. Original. Please call me back. Paraphrased. Please return my call. Original. I can explain everything. Paraphrased. I can tell you everything. Original. This is all a misunderstanding. Paraphrased. This is all a mistake. Original. By the third voicemail he was desperate. Paraphrased. By his third voicemail he sounded hopeless. Original. Melissa, please. Paraphrased. Melissa, please, I beg you. Original. I know you're upset, but we can work this out. Paraphrased. I know you're angry, but we can solve this. Original. Don't do this to us. Paraphrased. Don't do this to our relationship. Original. Janet's messages followed a similar progression from indignation to terror. Paraphrased. Janet's voicemails went from outrage to panic in a similar fashion. Original. How could you do this to me? Paraphrased. Why would you do this to me? Original evolved into, please, I'm sorry, but my job is on the line here. Paraphrased. It then changed to, please, I'm so sorry, but my career is at risk here. Original. By Thursday, exactly 1 week after I discovered their betrayal, the dominoes were falling faster than either Tyler or Janet could handle. Paraphrased. By Thursday, a week after I found out they had cheated on me, the consequences were happening faster than either Tyler or Janet could manage. Original. Victoria called me that morning with an update that made me smile for the first time in days. Paraphrased. Victoria phoned me that morning with news that made me smile for the first time in a while. Original. The judge granted our request for temporary exclusive possession of the marital home. Paraphrased. The judge has approved our request for you to have temporary exclusive use of the marital home. Original, she announced. Paraphrased, she declared. Original. Tyler has until 6 p.m. today to remove his personal belongings. Paraphrased. Tyler has until 6 this evening to take his personal possessions. Original. Everything else stays with you. Paraphrased. Everything else remains with you. Original. What about the bank accounts? Paraphrased. What's happening with the bank accounts? Original. Frozen pending the outcome of the divorce proceedings. Paraphrased. They have been frozen until the divorce is finalized. Original. But since you can demonstrate that the majority of the funds came from your salary, you'll have access to what you need for living expenses. Paraphrased. But since you can prove that most of the money came from your income, you will be able to access what you need for daily expenses. Original. He'll get a small allowance until everything is finalized. Paraphrased. He will receive a small amount of money for his expenses until everything is done. Original. I was working an afternoon shift at the hospital when Patricia Hughes from Janet's clinic called my personal phone. Paraphrased. I was on an afternoon shift at the hospital when Patricia Hughes from Janet's clinic called my personal cell phone. Original. Melissa, I wanted to let you know that we've made our decision regarding Janet Morrison. Paraphrased. Melissa, I wanted to tell you that we have reached a decision regarding Janet Morrison. Original. Given the morality clause in her contract and the public nature of these proceedings, we've decided to terminate her employment effective immediately. Paraphrased. Because of the morality clause in her contract and the public nature of this case, we have chosen to end her employment immediately. Original. I appreciate you letting me know, I said, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Paraphrased. I appreciate you informing me, I said, feeling a strong sense of gratification. Original. Off the record, I also wanted to thank you for handling this so professionally. Paraphrased. Off the record, I also want to thank you for handling this in such a professional way. Original. If the situation had become public without us being prepared, it could have damaged the clinic's reputation significantly. Paraphrased. If the situation had become public before we were ready, it could have greatly harmed the clinic's reputation. Original. That evening, I drove past our house to see Tyler loading boxes into his brother's pickup truck. Paraphrased. That evening, I drove by our house and saw Tyler putting boxes into his brother's pickup truck. Original. He looked haggard and defeated, a far cry from the confident man who'd been lying to my face just days earlier. Paraphrased. He appeared worn out and beaten, a completely different person from the confident man who had been lying to me only a few days before. Original. Our neighbors were clearly watching from their windows, and I knew the gossip mill in our subdivision would ensure everyone knew exactly why Tyler was moving out. Paraphrased. It was obvious our neighbors were watching from their windows, and I knew the local rumor mill would make sure everyone knew the exact reason Tyler was leaving. Original. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Paraphrased. I got a text message from Janet. Original. Can we please talk? Paraphrased. Can we please speak? Original. I lost my job. Paraphrased. I was fired. Original. I have nowhere to go. Paraphrased. I have no place to live. Original. I'm sorry. Paraphrased. I apologize. Original. I deleted the message without responding. Paraphrased. I erased the message without writing back. Original. The house felt different when I entered it that night. Paraphrased. The house felt different when I walked inside that evening. Original. Lighter somehow, as if removing Tyler's presence had lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Paraphrased. It felt lighter, as though Tyler's absence had removed a burden I hadn't even known was there. Original. In our bedroom, I opened the windows to let in fresh air and began the process of reclaiming my space. Paraphrased. I opened the windows in our bedroom to let in the fresh air and started the process of making the space my own again. Original. I found a note Tyler had left on my pillow. Paraphrased. I discovered a note Tyler had left on my pillow. Original. I know I hurt you, but destroying my life won't fix ours. Paraphrased. I know I've hurt you, but ruining my life won't mend ours. Original. Please reconsider. Paraphrased. Please think about this again. Original. I crumpled it up and threw it away. Paraphrased. I balled it up and tossed it in the trash. Original. Some bridges once burned were meant to stay ashes. Paraphrased. Some connections once destroyed are meant to stay that way. Original. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Paraphrased. The divorce was made official 3 months later. Original. True to Victoria's predictions, the combination of documented adultery and my financial contributions resulted in Tyler receiving minimal assets from our marriage. Paraphrased. Just as Victoria had predicted, the combination of the recorded adultery and my financial contributions led to Tyler getting very few assets from our marriage. Original. I kept the house, the majority of our savings, and my retirement accounts. Paraphrased. I retained the house, most of our savings, and my retirement funds. Original. Tyler was ordered to pay spousal support. Paraphrased. Tyler was required to pay alimony. Original. A particularly bitter irony that he'd have to send me monthly checks after what he'd done. Paraphrased. It was an especially bitter irony that he would have to send me monthly payments after what he had done. Original. Tyler's life unraveled completely in the aftermath. Paraphrased. Tyler's life completely fell apart after the divorce. Original. Word of the divorce spread through his workplace, and his reputation at Northrise Apparel was permanently damaged. Paraphrased. News of the divorce circulated through his office, and his professional standing at Northrise Apparel was forever harmed. Original. His supervisor, who valued integrity and family values, made it clear that Tyler's advancement opportunities were limited. Paraphrased. His boss, who believed in honesty and family values, made it clear that Tyler's chances for promotion were now very small. Original. Within 6 months, Tyler had been demoted to an entry-level position and eventually left the company altogether. Paraphrased. Within 6 months, Tyler was moved to a lower-level position and eventually left the company completely. Original. He moved back in with his parents, a 43-year-old man starting over with nothing but the shame of his choices. Paraphrased. He returned to live with his parents, a 43-year-old man who had to start his life over with only the shame of his decisions. Original. Janet fared even worse. Paraphrased. Janet's situation was even more difficult. Original. The nursing community in Nashville was smaller than people realized, and word of her affair with a married colleague's husband spread quickly through professional networks. Paraphrased. The Nashville nursing community was not as large as people thought, and the news of her affair with a married co-worker's husband traveled fast through professional connections. Original. Unable to find employment at any reputable medical facility in the area, she was forced to take a position at a rural clinic 2 hours outside the city, making half her previous salary and living in isolation. Paraphrased. Unable to find a job at any respectable medical facility nearby, she was forced to accept a position at a rural clinic 2 hours outside the city, where she earned half of her old salary and lived in solitude. Original. The friendship that had once been the cornerstone of her social life was destroyed, and she found herself completely alone. Paraphrased. The friendship that had once been the most important part of her social life was gone, and she was now completely by herself. Original. A consequence of betraying the person who had trusted her most. Paraphrased. This was the result of her betraying the person who had trusted her more than anyone else. Original. As I sit in my beautifully renovated home office, reviewing my investment portfolio that has grown substantially since the divorce, I feel a profound sense of peace. Paraphrased. As I sit in my beautifully updated home office, looking over my investment portfolio which has significantly increased since the divorce, I feel a deep sense of calm. Original. The revenge I'd orchestrated wasn't born of cruelty, but of justice, a careful dismantling of the lies that had nearly destroyed me. Paraphrased. The revenge I had planned was not a result of cruelty, but of a need for justice, a meticulous deconstruction of the lies that had almost ruined me. Original. Looking back on that journey from betrayal to vindication, I realized that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well and refusing to let others' betrayals define your worth. Paraphrased. Reflecting on the path from being betrayed to feeling justified, I understood that sometimes the most satisfying revenge is to simply live a good life and not allow the deceit of others to determine your value.